Right now, without thinking, you are doing something no animal on Earth has ever done. You are reading. Not scanning for danger, not sniffing for food. You are decoding a string of abstract shapes your ancestors invented, and turning them into meaning inside your skull. And the reason you can do that at all comes down to one letter. One, a shape so simple a child draws it by accident. A shape that appeared in one place at one moment in history and then quietly rewired the entire human mind. The letter A. But not the A you know, the A that started everything looked nothing like this. Flip it upside down. Now you're looking at a horned bull's head. That is what the earliest A was, a drawing, a picture, a bull. Around 1800 BCE, somewhere in the Sinai Peninsula, a dry strip of land between Egypt and Canaan, a group of Semitic workers etched something into stone. Egyptologists call it the Proto-Sinaitic script. It is the oldest known alphabet in human history, and the very first letter in that alphabet was called Aleph, which meant ox. They were not inventing writing from nothing. The Egyptians had hieroglyphs for thousands of years, a writing system so complex that only a tiny class of specially trained scribes could read it. To write Egyptian hieroglyphs fluently, you had to memorize hundreds of distinct symbols. Each symbol could represent a sound, a word, an idea, or all three at once, depending on context. Writing was power, and power was deliberately kept in the hands of the few. What those Sinai workers did was something genuinely radical. They stripped the Egyptian system down to its skeleton. They took the pictogram for ox and said, forget what it means, only keep what it sounds like. The first sound of the Egyptian word for ox, Aleph, becomes the letter that makes that sound, full stop. This is what linguists call the acrophonic principle. The sound of the name becomes the letter, and it changed everything. Because once you make that move, once you stop asking what a symbol means and only ask what sound it makes, you realize something extraordinary. Every word in your entire language is built from a tiny handful of sounds. Maybe 30, maybe 40, that is it. You do not need hundreds of symbols, you need dozens. Suddenly, anyone could learn to write. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most consequential democratic acts in the history of civilization. The Proto-Sinaitic script traveled. It evolved. By around 1050 BCE, it had become the Phoenician alphabet used by merchants and traders all across the ancient Mediterranean. The Phoenicians were not an empire, they were a trading culture. They needed to write quickly, portably, practically. The alphabet was perfect for them, and because they sailed everywhere, so did the alphabet. The Greeks got it around the 9th century BCE. And here's where something strange happened, something that linguist John Chadwick described as one of the most important modifications in the history of written language. The Phoenician alphabet had no vowels. It was a consonant-only script, what scholars call an abjad. You read it like a code. You filled in the vowels yourself using context. If you already spoke the language, you could figure it out. If you did not, you were lost. The Greeks had a problem. Several Phoenician consonant sounds did not exist in Greek, so they took those letters, the ones they did not need, and reassigned them. They turned them into vowels. E-I-O-U. The alphabet was now complete, not just a shorthand for speakers who already knew the language, a full phonetic map that a stranger could pick up and use to decode any word from scratch with no prior knowledge. And this change, this small, elegant, almost accidental change, did something to the human brain that we are only beginning to fully understand. Cognitive scientist Marianne Wolf spent years studying what literacy actually does to neural architecture. Her work, documented in her book Proust and the Squid, revealed something startling. The brain does not have a reading center. There is no part of your brain that evolved to read. Reading is too new. It has only existed for a few thousand years, a blink in evolutionary time. So what happens instead is this: your brain recruits. It pulls together regions originally built for vision, language, and object recognition and forces them to collaborate in a completely new way. Every time you learn to read, your brain is being physically rewired. New neural pathways form. Old pathways are redirected. Reading does not use your brain, it rebuilds it. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The kind of writing system you learn to read shapes which pathways form. Researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel, including Zeynep Sajan, have used brain imaging to study readers of different scripts, alphabetic readers versus logographic readers, people who read Chinese or Japanese kanji versus people who read English or Hebrew. They found measurable differences in which brain regions activate. The structure of your writing system, how many symbols, how they map to sound, determines at the level of neural tissue, how your brain processes language. The Greek alphabet did not just make writing more accessible, it produced a different kind of mind. Because when writing is phonetic, when symbols map directly to sounds, something cognitive happens. You start to think of language as a sequence of discrete, separable units. you start to hear the sounds inside your words. This ability, the ability to consciously isolate and manipulate the individual sounds of spoken language, is called phonological awareness. And research by psychologist Ovid Zhang has shown that children who learn alphabetic scripts develop this ability faster and more robustly than children who learn logographic scripts. Phonological awareness turns out to be the single most powerful predictor of reading success, which means the structure of the alphabet is not just a writing tool, it is a cognitive training system. But there is something even stranger. When the alphabet spread, when reading stopped being a skill for scribes and priests and became a technology available to anyone who spent a few weeks learning 30 letters, the nature of thought itself began to change. Philosopher and communication theorist Walter Ong spent his career studying what he called the shift from oral to literate culture. In purely oral societies, knowledge has to be memorable to survive. It gets encoded in rhythm, repetition, story, and proverb. Your mental life is social. You think in relationship to other speakers. There is no text to refer back to, no document to check. Memory is everything. Then writing arrives, and suddenly knowledge can live outside the body. You can write something down and go away from it, come back to it, argue with it, compare it to something written somewhere else. Contradiction becomes visible in a way it never was before. Logical inconsistency becomes something you can see on the page and point at. Ong argued that alphabetic literacy did not just preserve thought, it transformed the kind of thinking that was possible: abstract analysis, linear argumentation, the idea of an individual point of view separate from community and tradition. These are not natural to the human mind, they are technologies, they emerge from writing. Philosophy, mathematics, science, legal codes, none of these in their formal systematic sense exist in purely oral cultures. They require the externalization of thought that only writing makes possible. The bull's head in the sign did all of that. One small group of workers trying to make sense of a foreign writing system simplified it, made it portable, made it learnable. And in doing so, they handed every human who came after them a tool that would slowly, quietly, invisibly restructure the way the human mind organizes reality. Right now, you are reading this sentence. You are doing it without effort. The letters vanish and meaning appears as if by magic. But under the surface, your brain is running a process it was never designed to run, a process that took humanity thousands of years to invent, and that took your own brain years to build when you were small. You are the latest inheritor of a letter that started as a bull. And you are thinking thoughts that would have been impossible without it.